Hello and welcome to today's Lemongrass Live. My name's Jo Derry-Bennett from the Lemongrass marketing team. I'd also like to welcome Keith, Ben and Alex from Lemongrass as well, who will be leading the discussion today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. This session is being recorded. We'll share the link with you afterwards so you can refer back to it. And also, please feel free to ask any questions as we're going through. On your right-hand side or on your control panel, there's a question area, so please type them in. We'll try and answer as many as we can during this session. If we're not able to, we'll follow up directly by email afterwards. So with that, I'll hand over to Ben.
Thanks, Jo, and thanks everyone for joining into the next Lemongrass live session. So if you joined the last one, you remember that we spoke all about the business case, how to write the business case, questions to ask, how to get the most out of your move into cloud with your SAP landscape. So this week we're moving on to the next chunk in that process, looking at the wonderful world of procurement. So now you've got your business case, how do you ask your vendors the right question to make sure you're going to achieve what you've tried to set out within your business case? So with that, let me do some introductions and ask my colleagues to introduce themselves as well. I'll start. So Ben Lingwood, Chief Innovation Officer for Lemongrass. So I look after our technical architecture community and the company strategy as well. Keith.
Yeah, hey, good morning, everybody. Keith du Plessis here, Head of Solutions for Lemongrass, and I spend a lot of time writing responses to the RFPs that many of the procurement teams are firing out. So yeah, spent the last 25 years in SAP and a good part of the last 20 writing and preparing a lot of proposals.
Thanks, Keith. And Alex.
Hi there. Yeah, Alex Pond. I'm one of the business development directors at Lemongrass. 20-odd years SAP experience, and I look after the UKI region for Lemongrass.
Brilliant, thanks guys. Right, so let's get this party started with the first question. So I reckon, Alex, this one's for you. So I know categorically from working with you for many years, your three favourite letters in the alphabet are R, F and P. So it's an area you live and breathe inside of Lemongrass. So let's get started by just looking at what are the main areas that you regularly see are missed in RFP documents and templates that we struggle to respond with.
Well, I mean, there's so many three-letter acronyms in the SAP world. It's difficult to choose my favourite, but yeah, RFPs. I suppose I'm never sure they're the best way to get a real sense of an organisation, but they are definitely a necessary evil in the sales process. For me, they're a bit like Sir Black's blind date. So just because Gary from Basildon has given some mildly entertaining answers and dropped in the fact that he drives a Ford Granada Ghia, doesn't mean he's emotionally available and best suited for a week in Torremolinos. So I suppose my suggestion would be to get the best out of the partner, don't keep the responders at arm's length. Give them every opportunity to engage, to really understand the requirements and to get a real sense of the partner's DNA, and ultimately that will help shape the solution you want. Probably secondly, test them with POCs or pilots. It both tests the relationship with that they have with the hyperscaler and the funding that they'll get, but also you'll get a measure of the consultants and how they react to different problems. Thirdly, I suppose don't use old templates, particularly Excel, with lots of on-premise security questions. And then give the partner a real understanding of the business case, why they're looking to move to the cloud, and what does the future hold for the business, and what they're looking to achieve. And ultimately ask the partner how they'll get them there. And I suppose my last point is don't drop them in a peak holiday period in the summer or Christmas Eve, wanting a response in January. I suppose to use a blind date theme, be present on the date and available, you'll certainly get a better response. So Ben, and using the blind date theme, if you were a contestant on blind date, what questions would you want to hear from the contestant?
going to start calling you Scylla.
Yeah.
Good question.
Great.
So let's take a slightly more technical slant on some of the questions that wind us up on occasion, things that we challenge with. So I think one of the things that we commonly see are people, to your point, Alex, using basically repeat prescriptions. So you've got an RFP template. It's really the last thing you should use is using an old spreadsheet or an old RFP to ask old questions of new technology. And it's always difficult. So if I get a big list and it's asking for, we've got this many CPUs or this much RAM, or this is the particular shape and size that we've got deployed today, and then trying to ask again for that exactly in the cloud, I think as we mentioned in the last session, it misses most of the benefits case. Okay, so if you ask for the same old thing, don't expect for things to be that revolutionary, and you're probably seeing a lot of responses that we give where we're itching to try and give you more, but we haven't got the space to describe that in a very prescriptive mapping A to B list. So I'd say leave your technical debt at the doorway, don't lift and shift, and don't be prescriptive around the architecture and the sizing of what you're looking for. Buy a tailored solution. And typically what we find is give the vendor the chance to express that. So the sort of things that we look for is give us your business requirements, so give us your recovery metrics, or give us the data around your system. So in the SAP world, there might be things like early watch reports, items like that. Let us take a look at that and re-architect that based on what you're looking to achieve for your business case. So give the vendor room to breathe and to respond is a big ask. So big long checklists, 1,000-line spreadsheets, not a great way to articulate and tell the story of how you're going to meet your business case financially, technically, and operationally. So that's a really key one. The other one as well I would just point out on is being a little bit solution aware. We often see people get locked into this race to the bottom discussion, who can be the cheapest. My experiences and what we've seen in competitive dialogue, that never ends in a good outcome. We've seen some horrific examples with people doing some really shady architecture design in order to go as low and cheap as possible. Okay, so I would say be solution aware and be able to grade the quality of the architecture that's being proposed back to you. If you don't have that, don't be afraid to ask. Amazon will help you. Organizations like us can help you get an SI in that can help you mark and score and look at that solution as well. That's a really key thing as well. Don't aim for just the lowest price, because you do get what you pay for, and it's likely you'll end up missing your business case requirements and some of the reasons you're looking to get into cloud in the first place. So that'd be my top 3 or 4. So I think on that theme, migrations obviously are the gateway. They're the way to get into the cloud, the way to migrate your systems in. But we all know cloud technology evolves quicker than most of us can keep up. I mean, if I look at the Amazon world, there's 30, 40 things a week that are new. So keeping up is a real pace. So for me, operate is by far the most important area to look at in a response, how you optimize your responses and how you respond to that. So let me ask that question to you, Keith. What are your key things that you see, having lived and breathed quite a few RFPs over your many years in this area?
Yeah, thanks, Ben. No, I think you're absolutely right. A heavy weight of the RFPs is often around the technical architecture and the migration strategy, and kind of light touch on the operate. But in reality, the migration is a means to an end, and the operate is where you get the outcomes that you're after. So a bit more focus on that, making sure that you don't create rigidity around the operate model. You're clear on the outcomes that you want, and your own service organization, but give some flexibility to, as you do with the architecture, give some flexibility to the partner to address the operate concerns and put a model together that both gives you certainty of outcome and budgets, but also flexibility to change. Because there's no point adopting an agile architecture if you don't have an agile organization. So I think really focusing on that agility. Obviously SLAs are important, but there are a lot of other quality metrics that you can think about as well. So give your vendor the space to respond to your objectives rather than your inputs as such. It's not an input process output approach. So that's one thing, that keep the agility in your operate processes. There's different ways of working when you're in the cloud. I think the second is look for that leadership from your supplier. So hopefully they're going to bring some different ways of thinking, different ways of working, probably going to help you transform your own business. And so to that we always say, don't just buy an AWS migration or a Azure migration, a cloud migration, but actually buy a service that goes with it and use that service to help you embed the change into your organization. So, and probably on the third point is making sure that you have a model that enables you to modernize, so and adapt the change that the vendors are frequently releasing. So agility, flexibility, and an outcome-based approach to the operation. I guess those are some key areas that are a little bit different to a traditional outsourcing model.
Oh, thanks. So I can see we've had some questions pop in. Joe, do you want to MC a few questions for us?
Yeah, by all means. Yeah, let's try and get through as many as possible. So this is a good one. How long should you really allow for an RFP response? Maybe comparing from on-prem and cloud as we spoke about previously. Don't know who wants to take that one.
Let me answer that one. So it's a good question, actually. I would say my personal view is work at pace, right? So one of the benefits of cloud is you don't need multiple months, long drawn out processes in order to respond. And in fact, I was just talking with Keith earlier, we've just responded to an RFP in 3 weeks, start to finish, top to bottom, from submission to the customer asking. So I would say they should be snappy. And for me, it's also a sign of the maturity of the vendor as well. If they need months and months and months, that's probably not a good sign. So the world of cloud is highly automated. So that means things should be based on pattern technology, and therefore migration patterns, operation patterns, automation patterns should mean that that's much leaner to respond. If I look at a typical migration project, I know in the Lemongrass world, we're typically running an average migration start to finish in 5 months or less. And the response is normally no more than 3 or 4 weeks at an absolute max to actually push that together. The other thing I'd say is quite often people have this perception in their head that if it's a large landscape or a complex landscape, maybe it's got a large database, maybe got a monolithic finance system, it takes longer to migrate. The reality is it actually isn't. Whether it's a very small system or a very large system, the actual act of moving it, the actual act of the migration pattern doesn't change from the smallest to the largest. So equally, the complexity of the landscape doesn't really alter the time needed to do a response, I'd say, either. So keep it snappy. Again, use that as a benchmark to gauge the maturity of your vendors as well.
Okay, thanks for that one. Moving on. Does moving complex finance systems or moving to S4 change the RFP approach or even the questions that should be posed?
Let me go that. I mean, I think any move to S4 is transformational in its own nature. If you've made that move to AWS either beforehand as laying the foundation or as part of that move, that gives you a lot more flexibility through the project, standing up project environments really quickly. So overall, from a finance transformation or S4 transformation perspective, if you've got the right underpinning agile, flexible infrastructure, then that gives you the ability to move at pace in the project, to deal with the unknown more quickly, and not be infrastructure constrained in what you do. So yeah, always well worth thinking about the benefit of the infrastructure transformation along with your application transformation.
Okay, thanks for that one. Here's one we hear quite a lot, or we think about a lot. We've run a comparison before with cloud. It's more expensive than renewing our on-prem VM system. Have you seen this before, and what's your thoughts? Who wants to take that one?
Yeah, let me have a crack at that one. So yeah, we see that one quite a lot. So organizations comparing infrastructure as a service to hardware and looking at those areas based on on-premise systems. So there's a number of ways of looking at this. There's the purchase price of comparing a VM with a VM, and back to what I said at the beginning. Comparing a cloud environment with an on-premise environment, it's more than just comparing a VM with a VM at the beginning. You've got to look over a range of time. So firstly, I would say things like month-on-month cost savings. So Amazon and all the other cloud providers are always making optimizations, new releases and updates. So let's pick a real example. Just a couple of weeks ago, real life example, they slashed 42% of a particular type of storage called EFS in Amazon, right? So there's a really obvious way where you can easily then move a lot of your file volumes onto that, and then you're paying that reduced cost ongoing. And that happens all the time, every single month, with every single customer. We run an analysis. There is a cost saving, and a lot of these you don't know about till Amazon release, but typically there's something every month, a new type of EC2, virtual machine, new type of processor, new type of storage, something new that reduces the cost. You can't possibly achieve that with an on-premise solution. Equally, one of the benefits of the cloud for me is the agility. So we talk about DevOps a lot, in our RFP responses, we talk about the fact of, look, if you don't need that system on all the time, turn it off. If you don't need that environment running all of the time, in fact, don't even provision it, we'll create it on demand when you need it, systems on demand. So if you're an on-premise world and you're buying a big block of VM type solution on premise, you've got to buy all the hardware to run that. So you're immediately negative in that business case. So they're kind of the two obvious ones. There's some non-obvious ones as well. So we do get asked a lot around things like application refactoring. So if you've got commercial applications that are just a database and a bit of application logic, increasing trends now to refactor, to lift that application, move it into native cloud solutions. So maybe you move it into a Redshift or an Aurora with a front end and a native Amazon solution. That way it's completely serverless. So you're moving into a really cloud environment there. And secondly, you've got the ability to extend beyond SAP. So if you're looking at your data strategy, data lakes, driving deeper automation into the environment. Again, these are things you can only really do in a hyperscaler environment like Amazon. You can't really do that on an on-premise solution. So suddenly my VM block on-premise versus my cloud, they're two radically different things. So I don't think they're particularly comparable.
Just to add into that, if I can, but I mean, also when you're looking at transformation you need to think about those legacy applications, and when you adopt a cloud strategy, an AWS strategy, it gives you a really cost-effective model for archiving legacy systems as part of that. So so when you look at the full business case of the transformation and decommissioning, AWS absolutely brings that to life for you, where otherwise you get stuck with systems there that are now redundant, but you're still having to host.
Yeah.
Okay. I've got two semi-related questions, if that's okay. One person has asked, clearly there would be different questions if you either pre-selected your hyperscalers, you've got a hyperscaler of choice, or you're looking at multiple hyperscalers. Have you got any advice for those that are comparing the hyperscalers on how they could best structure RFPs or best questions to help them evaluate that?
Yeah, let me start with that and see if that's want to finish. But it's a question we hear quite a lot. We tend to keep our minds based on science on this. So we look at things like the hyperscaler reputation. So looking at the unplanned downtime that hyperscaler has had. So cold hard statistics available on all the Gartners and the Foresters, all the typical responders on that will give you a view of the unplanned downtime and therefore the stability. So choosing a hyperscaler that's maybe got more downtime, you're consciously making a decision that that's something you might be moving into. So I'd say look at the science on that. I'd also say looking at a hyperscaler based on not only your workload today, but the workload you might want to do later on. So no secrets in Lemongrass, we tend to focus on Amazon. And I know the other hyperscalers are great, but the other reason why we focus on that is because we go a lot deeper and broader with things like automation, and we also do a lot of things with things like data lakes and some broader topics. And there's a great ecosystem of technology with Amazon for that. So we tend to focus on, in our world, the Amazon for that. But I would say, regardless of the hyperscaler that you're looking at, make sure you're not looking just at the immediate workload, but what you might want to do in 3, 4, 5 years. And to Alex's point earlier, actually, was a very good point. Do a proof of concept. Actually test it. Pick what scares you. Is that a migration? Is that an automation procedure? Is that you're switching to a different version of SAP or something like that? Get them to prove it. Test the technology. Great way of doing it.
Actually, you stole the next question, but maybe we could just elaborate a bit further. When you talk about proof of concept, give examples or the timescales that typically can take to start that proof of concept or determine it. Does that vary, the RFP timescales?
Keith, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think question is whether you want to do the proof of concept as part of the RFP process or beforehand. And I think from our experience, in fact, dealing with that situation right now with a customer where they had done that analysis beforehand, they'd gotten a really good understanding of the hyperscaler options, and they made their preference. And so in their instance, you know, it's a POC that runs over a couple of weeks, and then they made their preferences, and the RFP process is now actually a lot more simplified for them because they took their time to invest up front. That, you know, the RFP, they know what they're looking for, they're well educated, and so they're better able to make the decisions about the SI that they're now going to buy and the solutions that the SIs put forward. So that just drawing the benefit of the POC timescales and to the RFP process itself. Hopefully that makes sense for, you know, for people to hear.
But I think also you have to question why you're doing the POC. Is it to prove the system can work in the cloud, or is it to effectively test the partner in terms of how they work and how they react to different problems? So, you know, I think where we've seen, you know, a good amount of success is where, you know, we've taken a difficult system, you know, an elderly, complicated system, and managed to put that in the cloud, and then work with the customer throughout the process so they can see the how we've done it, and then how it operates in the cloud.
Good. Conscious of time and keeping this to a conversational, compact session, so we'll call time out on questions. Good questions, keeping us on our toes for Friday afternoon. Thank you. So let me do a quick wrap up then. So I'm going to ask both of my colleagues here for their top 3 takeaway points from the discussion today. So let's start with Keith.
Yeah, right. Well, I mean, kind of tying to what I was just saying around the POC, you know, do your research, get a particularly for the procurement guys, you know, get a foundational understanding so that you know what you're buying and can sharpen your questions around the things that differentiate. And find a way to balance, you know, from an operate perspective, find a way to balance understanding and stability with flexibility and agility. And then to the point that we've been discussing before the start of this, you know, putting out thousands of non-functional requirements into spreadsheets that take hours and hours to complete and try and evaluate probably doesn't add a lot of value to your process. You know, you're buying enterprise class. So you know, focus on the things that differentiate, not the things that everybody's delivering.
Cool, thanks, Keith. Alex.
Yeah, so my 3, don't keep responders at arm's length, and try not to have a cold question and answer process. Engagement, give them the opportunity to engage and understand the business case and why the business is considering cloud. And then lastly, test them, you know, as we've talked about, perhaps with a pilot or POC, get a real sense of what they're like to work with, or what the system's like to operate in the cloud, rather than judging on a written response on methodology.
Nice, thank you. And my 3, I'm going to keep it simple. So I would say the first one I mentioned earlier is leave your technical debt at the door. So a cloud migration for me is an opportunity to renew, refresh, and reduce costs, back to that business case we spoke about in the first session. So really not to ask the same old questions of new technology. Keep an open mind, embrace cloud technology, and use that as a chance to actually transform what you're doing technically, operationally, and commercially. So the second one for me is that point I made about being solution aware. We see this time and again about the race to the bottom. Who can discount the most to buy the business is not a good indicator of who's going to do a good run and operate business for you. So I would say, look, be solution aware. Make sure that you're going in eyes open on the response that you've got from your vendor. Make sure that it's technically sound, that it meets the business SLAs that you're looking for, and technically it's going to give you that boost in operational effectiveness as well. So that's a really important one. And then the third one, back to my colleague's point here, is as much as I know Keith loves a 1,000-line spreadsheet, is look, give a chance to your vendor to describe how they'll meet your goals. We often see this in responses where it's a very, very restrictive form. You've got 10 words or a checkbox exercise. doesn't always give us a chance to respond. If you talk about things like DevOps or FinOps or business operations or automation, they don't fit into classical RFP templates. And that's often a problem trying to describe how that's really going to make a big difference in a very limited form. So I would say don't be too binary in your response templates. Give the ability to do some free text and to describe. It's also a great way of seeing the depth of experience within your vendors as well. So that'd be my top 3 that I would say from today's discussion. So with that, I'd just like to thank both of my colleagues here for joining us on the discussion this morning, and thank you for your time. And Joe, let me hand back to you.
Thank you. Yeah, very, very insightful. And thanks to everyone who raised questions. It generated a great discussion and some good points to take away. As mentioned earlier, this session has been recorded. So in the next few days, I'll share that recording link with you, and also the contact details for Ben, Keith and Alex if you've got any further queries or would like to follow up with them for a further discussion. Just final point from me, as Ben mentioned, Lemongrass Live is a monthly interactive informal discussion that we already have our next session scheduled for April the 16th, and it's on well architecting, so thinking ahead. Some of the things that came out there about that continuous improvement, so how do you take advantage of DevOps, FinOps, how do you make sure you're continually moving forward with the enablers that cloud is bringing to you. So that's also contained in the email that you'll receive. So I just want to say thank you again to everyone. I wish everyone a good rest of the day. Thanks ever so much. Bye.